Hi everyone, this is Nick Pollock here from Roar Lions Roar. While you're here, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that alert bell so you never miss any of our new content. And if you prefer to listen instead of watch, make sure you check us out on your podcast platform of choice where you can subscribe and download each new episode. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. Go State! You know, Matt, as we start this, it'd be interesting if we started our podcast the way, if you've ever listened to the Always Sunny in Philadelphia podcast, one, you should, it's excellent. But they always start, they just start it with like just general conversation before they even intro anything, kind of like their show, I guess, is mimicking that in a way. Hi, Matt. We're here tonight for Roar Lions Roar. I'm your host, Nick Pollock, and I'm joined by Matt DeBear. Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing great. In the like 10 seconds before we hit record, keen observers will notice that the green wall that is usually behind me is gone because of course it is Michigan State week. And with rotating myself in my home office, the TV in the office is now visible, and I figured out how to get a Penn State logo on there. So I'm feeling very accomplished, especially on the day before Thanksgiving when we're recording this, where my brain power is at an all-time low.
Yes, this is truly a technological innovation for the ages, Matt, being able to get a logo on his television. That's the kind of stuff they write. They write stories about that. That's incredible.
I'm going to write a story about it. If only we had a website we could publish it on.
On the subject of, visual things, as I start recording this, I'm a little worried. I think I've worn the same exact hat and sweatshirt for the last 3 or 4 podcasts that we've recorded. So I'm going to have to go back and check that. I might need to switch it up next time.
Definitely.
But hi, everyone.
That's a returning guest.
The hat is all. Yeah. The general rule, if I have showered that morning, I won't wear a hat. If I haven't showered this day yet, then I'm wearing the hat. Or if no, that's pretty much the general rule. I do love this hat though. I was hoping to, my wife's been bugging me for ideas for Christmas gifts, and I really want the block S hat the coaching staff has been wearing lately, but there are very few sizes of it available online right now. So I guess I'm just sticking with the Rainiers hat for now, but that's okay. Hi everyone, we're here to talk about a football game. But actually, Matt, before we dive into the Penn State, Michigan State matchup to end the regular season here, first, I wanted to take a second and talk about the college football playoff rankings. Now, we don't need to go through all of them. Obviously, there's, not all that much interesting happening at the top. But of course, Penn State stayed at number 11 this week, same place they were last week. I think the main things that people were talking about as a result of those rankings, as far as Penn State is concerned, one is that Tennessee remained ahead of them. I'm curious your thoughts on that. Do you agree that they should still be ahead? I'll let you go first, and then I'll chime in.
I think just on the basis of success, and big wins, they've got the win over Alabama, they've got the win over LSU. I was having this conversation with some folks last night that despite the moving target that the college football playoff committee is as far as trying to figure out what's important from week to week, because it's they decide whatever is going to be important that week to justify whatever ranking they want to put out.
Right.
But really, since the advent of the playoff and the committee and everything, big wins have always seem to outweigh somewhat consistently bad losses or just the lack of big wins, which I think is really what it comes down to for Penn State versus Tennessee, is they've got those 2 wins. Penn State's best win is probably Purdue or Minnesota, neither of whom is ranked.
Yeah.
Obviously they played the close game against Ohio State, got nuked by Michigan. I think that's really all it comes down to is at this point in time, obviously there's one more data point this weekend with Penn State, Michigan State, and Tennessee playing Vanderbilt. I'm curious to see with a full game without Hendon Hooker, who's obviously out for the season now with the torn ACL, if, depending on how Tennessee performs against the Vanderbilt team that's playing pretty well, 1-2 straight for the first time and probably since James Franklin's been there in the SEC, I'm curious to see, what that may or may not do to that specific conversation going forward.
I very much agree that Tennessee's best 2 wins, obviously, like you said, they're miles ahead of anything Penn State's done. Like, Penn State doesn't really have a great win this year. It's just how the schedule laid out for them. But I think my only qualm is that, like you said, it's typically been more about the big wins for the committee. But in my opinion, more than anything else, it seems to me like they really, obviously, like you said, the target moves, the justification changes, but more often than not, it seems like their primary goal has been to get the teams like in the best form, for a lot to use a soccer term now that the World Cup is going on, which team's in better form at the time. And to me, that's the only, like, when I look at these rankings, like, ostensibly, right? Like, these are a list of rankings of teams in terms of who they think is most likely to win the college football playoff. Even when you get outside of the top four, obviously, only those top four matter. But ostensibly, the rest of the rankings reflect that. Like, they think whoever's at like 24 is the 24th most likely team to win a playoff. So my only question is, like, can you really say that Tennessee is more likely to win a college football playoff right now than Penn State without Hendon Hooker? Like, the only thing Tennessee can do or could do is score. And now you're losing your quarterback. Like, what are the chances they're going to be able to continue doing that effectively? They'll probably still be able to do enough to beat Vanderbilt, I assume. I know Vanderbilt's playing well, but they're still Vanderbilt. Like, there's just not a ton of talent there. Maybe like a big Penn State win this week is enough to make the committee say, yeah. And if Tennessee, even if they win, if they look less impressive doing so, maybe that's enough for the committee to be like, Penn State probably does go ahead. But that's the only thing for me. It's like, if that's what the rankings are, most likely to win a playoff, how can you say that the team that doesn't have the one thing that it did well can be ahead of them? But that's just me. Other interesting things here. I know Oregon jumped ahead of Penn State. Flip-flopped with Utah. I believe Utah was at 10 last week, and now Oregon's up at number 9. Tennessee dropped down to 10. Which, whatever. Either Oregon. I think the loser of is an Oregon USC Pac-12 championship locked in now?
I don't think so. I think a couple things that are very likely to happen this weekend have to happen, but I
know
believe as long as
Oregon as Oregon State, obviously they got Civil War, and Oregon State's not bad.
I believe USC has clinched their spot. I would have to imagine.
Okay.
As you can imagine, out here in the frozen, well, not that frozen at the moment, Midwest, we don't get a lot of Pac-12 specifics, and I don't stay up nearly as late as I used to watching those games on Saturday. But I believe SC has clinched their spot, and I believe with a win against Oregon State in the former Civil War, Oregon clinches their spot.
Right. Actually, no, that makes sense, right? Because Washington just beat Oregon, so Washington probably still does have technically a shot to get that if Oregon State wins. Although I don't know that Washington's going to beat Washington State. Washington State's been playing really well, so we'll see there. Go Cougs. But I think either way, if it is Oregon, USC, I don't think it's unfair to say that the loser of that game could drop below. I mean, Oregon obviously definitely would. I don't think it's unfair to say that USC might drop below Penn State in that case, because, I mean, USC is what? They have one loss. And even then, they're behind LSU. Like, they're still at 6. Like, I don't think they're getting... I kind of think their spot is just a function of their record at this point. Like, I don't really get a sense that the committee really wants to have them that high. Maybe that's just me, but... just another interesting, I guess. And then quick one. Do you think LSU at 5 is the right move?
I think it's kind of irrelevant. They've got, like we were talking about with Tennessee, they've got the good wins. Even in that loss to Florida State to start the year, as ridiculous as it was to watch, Florida State's playing as well as just about anyone in the country at the moment. So, I mean, that loss is certainly not a bad loss. And I'm blanking on who the other one was too, but
they lost to didn't they lose to Tennessee?
Yes, thank you. They got nuked by Tennessee in Baton Rouge, I believe. So with Hendon Hooker. So I think part of it is just semantics. I will be fascinated if LSU can somehow. Well, I think they should beat Texas A&M this weekend. But if they get through
boy,
Texas
would it
A&M,
be funny if they didn't.
Oh, it'd be. I can't think of the right adjective, but it would be very funny. And then what would be even funnier is if they somehow go on after that and beat Georgia, despite having picked up that third loss. That would certainly eliminate them. But No, I think when you look at quality of wins and really even quality of losses, they have a ridiculous 1 point loss to start the year to a pretty good team, which turned out to be a pretty good team.
Yeah.
And then the Tennessee loss. I don't know. I like I was saying, I feel like from any week to week, you end up with different justifications. I think you could probably put USC ahead of them. Just if you're really arguing, that level of semantics.
Yeah.
But are you going to put Alabama ahead of them? No. Are you going to put Clemson ahead of them? I don't think you can.
Right. That's the thing, right? Like objectively, do I think LSU is the 5th best team in the country? No, but there's no good reason to. I guess USC has an argument, but there's no good reason to put anybody else ahead of them right now. And it also, gives the committee another like if LSU did find a way to beat Georgia somehow, it gives them a really good reason to continue to keep Georgia in the top 4 no matter what. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I think you and I have talked about this a little bit too during the season, that outside of probably the top 3 teams, Georgia, Ohio State, and Michigan at this point, 4 through 12 through 14 kind of feel a little interchangeable. It's obviously within that group, some teams are better than others, but if I told you right now, Penn State's going to play TCU in a fictitious first round playoff game, just for example, I think both you and I would agree that's probably a pretty good game.
Yeah.
And that TCU is deservedly the 4th ranked team in the rankings at the moment. So that 4 through 12, we'll just say for the sake of argument, all feels a little flexible. You can make a case for any team within that grouping to be ranked just about anywhere, I think.
Yeah, and then as far as Penn State fans rooting interest in order to get Penn State to a New Year's Six bowl game, I think unfortunately you look like Alabama. I think for me the biggest toss up between in the rankings, like I don't like Penn State and Alabama is a really interesting comparison. Unfortunately, Alabama's not going to move because they're not going to lose to Auburn. They could lose to Auburn, but they're probably not going to lose to Auburn. So they're not going to move. I think you just kind of have to, you have to root for chaos in the Pac-12. I think you want things to hold serve in the SEC. You want Georgia to cruise to their championship. You want the game to be close, I think, because obviously for me, I know I'm still on team Rose Bowl, so I'm still on team put Michigan and Ohio State in, as painful as that would be at the time. But we'll have plenty to discuss regarding the playoff in the coming week, and after championship games finish up and all that stuff. So for now, Matt, let's talk about the actual Penn State football game this weekend, and that is the, of course, clash of the Titans between the Nittany Lions and the Michigan State Spartans. Right now, it is an 18.5 spread in favor of the home team. That is Penn State here. SP Plus has this as a Penn State 41-17 victory, so that is actually even more than the spread is concerned. And Penn State has been really good against the spread this year. I believe they only have not covered twice this year. Michigan and then Northwestern are the only times they failed to cover, I believe. So they've been really good in that regard. So not a bad idea to bet Penn State here. So we'll break down, the two sides of the ball here, go into a little bit more detail. But Matt, what are your just initial thoughts about this game right off the top?
And maybe this is a little myopic given the state of the two programs at the moment, but I have very strong 2016 Penn State, Michigan State vibes. If you remember that game, I think Penn State was actually trailing by a field goal or so at halftime. But it feels like two programs kind of going in very opposite directions as I spill my water all over the place.
And just to add to it, your logo has now disappeared in the back too. So you're all over.
Now the land grant trophy. I'm all over the place.
Excellent.
But actually, I need to clean this up. Otherwise, my floor is going to soak through. So
you go do that. Yeah, you go do that. We can pause this and we'll be right back, listeners. Hello, we are back. The mess has been cleaned. Full disclosure, this is the second time we restarted this because the first time everything froze. So we're off to a really great start over here. Is everything all good now, Matt?
It seems to be.
Okay.
My water is not within like arm's reach. So if you see me turn dramatically away, just to grab a drink of water. But the faithful listeners are aware that I'm in a new home and I wasn't too keen on damaging floors or walls or furniture or anything like that. But it did allow me to update the graphic behind me, if you're watching this on YouTube, to a better edition of the land grant trophy.
Yes, it looks wonderful. God. All right, Matt. Speaking of which, I just inadvertently said we're off to a good start, which now I have plans to probably over the football offseason make some sort of like theme song or intro or something for this, and it's definitely going to include the Bill O'Brien. Off to a great start for sure. So I need to remember that. Matt, before we dive into the specifics of this football game that we are talking about, let's really quickly talk about our friends over at Home Field Apparel. You've heard us talk about Home Field before. You know how, I'm sure if you're listening to this, you probably have some of their stuff already, but you know how great it is. You know how soft it is. You know how unique and special all of their products are. And right now until November 27th, which I believe is
Sunday, yes.
Yeah. Until November 27th, they have their Black Friday sale active on the site right now, and that is using the code Black Friday, all caps, all one word, at checkout for 20% off of your order, whether it is your first time visiting the site or not. This is the biggest discount they offer all year. Full disclosure, there will be another similar one directly following the 27th that is more, holiday themed, that will still be 20% off. So you do have time here. But this is, this time of year is the biggest discount they offer all year. And of course, this is the only one that is always good, no matter if it's your first time ordering or not. So, we still have our Roar Lions Roar code that's good all year round for 15% off for your first order, but definitely take advantage of this opportunity now to get 20% off. As always, Home Field makes the best stuff, best designs. They go in the yearbooks, they find all those really great material. We actually, one of our buddies, his mom dug up it was a poster, right, that had all the different if you've seen their hockey and wrestling shirts, it has this like Nittany Lion cartoon playing hockey and then wrestling, and one of our buddies found the poster that has other stuff, like there's a basketball one, there's a golf one, there's a baseball one. It's awesome.
Yeah, I would buy, just anyone in licensing at Penn State, anyone at Home Field listening to this, I would buy those shirts.
Yeah,
probably all of them.
Yeah, I have the wrestling one. The wrestling one's fantastic. But if they made that basketball one and that baseball one and that golf one, I would buy those instantly, no hesitation. They're beautiful.
Oh, the baseball one, you would buy two.
Yeah. As a former faithful Penn State baseball season ticket holder, I would happily buy that several cop. Give me that shirt. Give it to me on a sweatshirt. Give it to me on a crew neck. I'll buy them all. So once again, use that code Black Friday, all caps, all one word, at checkout for 20% off, whether it's your first order, second order, or 100th order. That's Home Field Apparel. Take advantage. Sale ends on November 27th. Let's talk about this football game again. Let's talk about Penn State's offense against Michigan State's defense first, because the Penn State offense is, well, no, that's not fair, because the defense has been playing outstanding too. But the offense has really found its stride. Really, ever since the conclusion of the Michigan game, the Penn State offense has been playing at a really high level, especially on the ground. They've really seemed to figure things out. Mike Yursich has that unit rolling. And Michigan State currently allowing 417.1 yards per game to its opponents. They are, on the year as average, they are being outscored by their opponents. Their last 5 games, they lost last week 39-31 in double overtime to Indiana. They beat Rutgers 27-21. They beat Illinois, shockingly, 23-15. Lost to Michigan 29-7 and beat Wisconsin 34-28. Of course, if you notice in there, those last 2 games, that includes 39 points allowed to Indiana and 21 points allowed to Rutgers, 2 teams that we have very recently seen Penn State just absolutely whoop. This does not feel like a fun matchup for the Spartans. Do you agree?
Yeah, and I before the incident a couple of minutes ago, I think feels like 2 teams going in vastly different directions. You've got Penn State, who has really, I think, found themselves from an identity standpoint on both sides of the ball. And, it was really, defense, we'll talk a lot about that, I'm sure. But the defense is really, I think, you see them fully functioning in Manny Diaz's system now, I think. I think that's one of those things that we probably glossed over a little bit too much at the first half of the year, is that learning curve, picking up a new defense. I know they talk about the similarities between what Diaz runs versus what Pry runs, but it's different. There's different terminology. They're asking guys to do different things. And you have guys like Abdul Carter that are taking on bigger and bigger roles, that are not only learning the defense, but learning college football. And I think you've seen them really since, and it's aided somewhat by the competition, certainly, but I think you've really seen them, the light bulb go on in the last 3 or 4 games from a defensive standpoint, with that attacking, dominant, just suffocating level of defense that they've really played. And I think that's really, certainly last week against Rutgers was, I think, kind of the driving force of this team. The offense, and credit Rutgers, they're a solid defensive team. The defense and special teams is what got Penn State going, and I think kind of sparked them for we'll say the second half of that game. And then you look at Michigan State, who has just kind of sputtered here to the finish line. They need this win to get bowl eligible. Just today, we learned that 7 of their players have been charged in relation to the fight at Michigan Stadium against Michigan a few weeks ago. It came out, Mel Tucker said earlier in the week that they are once again not practicing, or no contact practices, because they're just so decimated from a personnel standpoint, both as a result of suspensions from that. I'm sure, just like a lot of teams at this time of year, just beat up physically. It feels like Penn State is rising towards the end of the season, and Michigan State, coming off that blown lead against Indiana to lose in overtime at home last week, just trying to get to the end of the season here. And I'm curious to see, I guess, how that plays out, because I think it's easy to look at that from the outside and kind of see what's going on. But you got the weird post-Thanksgiving atmosphere. You're going to have a stadium that's, maybe 3/4 full. The students aren't going to be back in mass. I don't think it's going to be great weather. It doesn't sound like. And you've got one team playing for 10 wins and a major bowl game, while another team, I'm not sure if getting bowl eligible and getting to 500 is quite the motivating factor. Again, from the outside looking in, it seems like that's, this seems like the kind of season that you kind of just want to end. Penn State's been in that position certainly for the last couple of years, where you get to the end of the year and there's just not a whole lot of major significance to play for. And you've got a team that, like Penn State this year, that does. I think that's probably for me, the biggest story going into the game.
Sure. Now, to go to the question I originally asked you then, when Penn State has the ball on offense, it seems like it seems like, not that I don't appreciate your thoughts, I do. But it seems like Michigan State's really struggled against the run, especially the last 3, 4, 5 weeks. Penn State's rolling on the ground right now with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. It feels like, when you consider all the things that you just mentioned, the fact that, Michigan State, playing to get to a bowl game is one thing, but again, like, how motivated are you really to get to like the bottom tier bowl game that a Big Ten team can play in? Like, you're probably headed to either New York or Detroit. Like, it's not really that big of a motivating factor, really. So it seems like the type of matchup where those two freshmen are going to have the chance to run wild. Yes.
And I had to finish my thought from the great water spill of 2022. This is the ultimate pre-Thanksgiving, night before Thanksgiving podcast, I think, at this point. But yeah, and I think it is.
We're both too old to really be participating in like Thanksgiving Eve shenanigans out of the bar. So instead, we just come on a podcast and say silly things.
And don't pay any attention to what the prompt is.
To be fair, I didn't give you the outline this time. Everyone at home, I did my outline on little pieces of paper this time, trying something new. So, maybe it's my fault.
It is absolutely your fault. I'll 100% agree with that. But yeah, like you were saying, Nick, the driving force of the Penn State offense has been the two freshman running backs. And I think what was encouraging to me from out of the Rutgers game is for the first time in a while, they had a little bit of pushback. They weren't able to run the ball very effectively early on.
Mm-hmm.
And James Franklin talked a little bit about that at halftime and then after the game about some of the things Rutgers was doing. But they made that adjustment to open up the running game a little bit more. And you saw that take effect in the second half. It wasn't, from a statistical standpoint, the dominant performance that we've seen the previous 2 weeks necessarily, but they figured it out. And I think, especially with an offensive line that was still missing the starters that we've talked about quite a bit, that was really encouraging too. I think to see them face some adversity and come through again against a relatively good Rutgers defense.
Yeah, that's that's something we talked about heading into the Rutgers game, was that like for the Rutgers struggles, like they've had a good defense. Like they've given up their points, but overall that has been a relatively stout defensive team. And yeah, it was really I think even beyond impressive, like something that we have not really seen Penn State do over the last 2 years or so is be able to really adjust offensively. They're always able to adjust defensively, but struggling on offense and then actually kind of changing the way they attack is not something we've seen them do all that often. So yeah, totally agree. That's awesome to see and definitely bodes well up against like we said, an unmotivated group on the Spartan side of the field. Really, like it's just like I think that's just going to be Penn State's game plan. Like I think the plan is just going to be let Singleton and Allen run wild, even despite we know that this still isn't their ideal offensive line arrangement. We don't know for sure if Olu Fashanu is going to be back this week. I would assume no at this point. I think if we see he and Joey Porter Jr. on the other side again, it's probably just going to be in the bowl game. But who knows? We know Landon Tengwall's still out for the year. Drew Shelton, I think, had a bit of a rougher time against Rutgers than he did in his previous assignments. So it's like it doesn't seem, I think, when you look at the whole picture, it doesn't seem like the ideal time for Penn State just to pound the ball on the ground, but I think that's what they're going to do. I do also think there's going to be a bit of I think they are going to try to manufacture some things for Sean Clifford to find some easy success in his final game as a Nittany Lion, which is something we'll talk about just slightly more at the end here as I added to my handwritten outline here, Sean Clifford. So I think that's probably something to watch for as well, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. The other side of the ball, Matt, when Penn State is on defense, you did touch on it a little bit already. Michigan's offense just has not really done a whole lot this year. Like Peyton Thorne seems to have taken a step back. Jalen Berger, transfer from Wisconsin, is fine. It's not really anything all that special. Jaden Reed remains a good receiver, along with their other receiver is Coleman. Yeah. Like they're fine. It's just not all that impressive of a unit.
It reminds me a lot of the 2020 and 2021 Penn State offenses. Obviously different issues, but I think the root of it for Michigan State is without Kenneth Walker, they just don't have the running game to take the pressure off Peyton Thorne.
And where is he now? Obligatory Seahawks reference. Thank you.
I'm going to spill my water again just to see if we can cut that out. But I think much like you saw with Sean Clifford in the last couple of years, when the game is on his shoulders, he's just not that kind of quarterback. He's a perfectly fine college quarterback, like we're going to talk about again, I'm sure, like we've talked about all season. But much like Clifford the last 2 years, Peyton Thorne, without that running game to take the pressure off, not just him, but the offensive line and the passing game as a whole, just has obviously struggled. Like you said, he's 18 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. He's been sacked 15 times. They have the weapons out wide, much like Penn State has had the last couple of years. They just aren't able to have that balance I think you need when you don't have, when you need to have that balance when you don't have that elite level quarterback. And Peyton Thorne is, I don't want to beat it to death, but he's that game manager when he doesn't need to do everything, when you've got that running game to rely on, like they had with Kenneth Walker last year. Like a lot of quarterbacks, is just much more effective. And Jalen Berger perfectly fine, averaging a little under 5 yards a carry. Jarek Broussard averaging about the same. They have just over 1,300 yards of rushing this year, whereas I think it was last year Kenneth Walker closed in on close to 2,000 all on his own.
Yeah.
And that opened up so much more of their offense. It forced teams to play the run more. It forced their receivers and tight ends into more advantageous matchups. And I think what you've seen from Penn State's defense in the last month is, even without Joey Porter the last couple games, that secondary is really, really good. They've figured out how to get to the quarterback, both from a defensive line and linebacker perspective. And I think Michigan State still wants to run the ball. That's still the root of what they want to be, but they don't have that overpowering rushing game that they had a year ago. And I think that's going to allow Penn State to be more aggressive and not necessarily have to commit numbers to the running game like they had to last year, that allowed Peyton Thorne to get those one-on-one matchups. I think of a couple big time plays that I believe it was Reed that made them in one-on-one coverage. And I don't think you're going to see a lot of that kind of that many situations like that for them, because Penn State has showed now in the last couple weeks that they can stop the run without committing 7-8 guys just to stop the run.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, like, even more importantly than being able to stop the run with just that front four, they've proven that they can get into opposing backfields with just that front four, which is, equally, obviously that doesn't directly affect the run game, because we're talking about passing downs. But when you can do that, it changes the entire complexion of how the opposing team can even call offense from the get-go. Yeah, I'm curious to see. Penn State has held 3 straight opponents now to under 200 total offensive yards. It'd be really cool to see them end the year and the regular season with 4 straight such performances. I wager we'd have to go back quite a while to find the last time that a Penn State defense did that. That's pretty, that's a pretty ridiculous statistic. And as you were talking, I was thinking, like, what should Michigan State's strategy be? Knowing the level that Penn State's defense is playing at, I kind of think that, think about the 2 games that Penn State lost this year. They got smacked by Michigan, who just ran it down their throats. And we posit that was partially because Penn State probably devoted a few too many resources to the threat of JJ McCarthy's arm, which, as the season has played out, doesn't really pose that much of a threat. But, against Ohio State, like, it took a rash of turnovers and then just big quick strike plays. I still don't really feel like I know what the best strategy is for attacking this Penn State defense. I mean, it's probably mainly try to keep the ball on the ground and then attack in play action deep over. Like, that's probably the formula. Either way, it's not something Michigan State can do, I don't think.
No, I think, and I'd be curious to see this matchup again now, because I think Penn State, like I was saying earlier, has figured out so much defensively, especially. But I think Michigan as an offensive team is what is kind of Penn State's kryptonite. Penn State's not great at linebacker up the middle. They obviously have 2 great linebackers in Jacobs and Abdul Carter. But Michigan was able to take advantage of that weakness up the middle. Some size issues, we'll say, up front on defense. Like you said, run it right down their throat. Ohio State just out-talented them. It was the Marvin Harrison and CJ Stroud show. If I were Mel Tucker in Michigan State, I think my game plan would be, my best players are my receivers, Keon Coleman and Jaden Reed. And I know Penn State's strength is in the secondary, whether Joey Porter plays or not, but you got to find a way to get the ball in their hands. And I think because of that, I don't know if that's necessarily a winning formula because of how good Penn State's secondary is, but that's, I think, what Manny Diaz has to take away. Take their best players out of the game. Jalen Berger's a perfectly fine running back. He's not going to beat you. Keon Coleman and Jaden Reed can. And I think it plays right to Penn State's strengths with Johnny Dixon, Kalen King, Jair Brown, Jalen Reed, Keaton Ellis. We could keep going on and on. You guys all know the names. But Michigan State's best players match up with Penn State's best players for the most part on defense, and they don't have the personnel to expose where Penn State's weak on defense.
Right. Yeah. Curious, quick aside. Who was it? I think CBS Sports was the mock draft, had Joey Porter Jr. going number 9 to the Detroit Lions. Just really quick aside, how high do you think Porter actually gets?
This is a much better question for you than me. Every time I think I've got the NFL draft figured out or make a bold prediction, I end up hilariously wrong. But from what I do know about and pick up from following people that do this for a living, is Porter checks all the boxes that you want in a cornerback. He's got the size, the strength, the length. I'm not sure he has that elite level speed, which I think might hurt him. I'm very curious how he tests in the 40 and those sorts of things at the combine. But he does so many things well. And I think other than maybe quarterback and maybe defensive end, shutdown corner is the biggest need in the NFL. It's such a passing league that having a guy like him who we've seen it this year when he's been in takes away half the field. He's going to get beat. Every cornerback does. But he wins that matchup far more often than not. And so I don't know if top 10 seems really high. Cause like I said, I don't know if he necessarily ends up having that great elite speed. He's so sound positionally. He's so strong. I think that makes up for a lot of that. But I certainly think, top 15, top 20 seems reasonable. He's been mock drafted there by anyone who does this for a living for the better part of a year now, it seems like.
Yeah, I agree that he probably won't have the same top end speed, but when you're a cornerback and you're a bit bigger and they trust that you could be more physical, usually that kind of helps you avoid that question so much. But yeah, I think the main thing that'll work for him as far as his draft position is going to be that there are only 2 quarterbacks who deserve to be drafted in the top 10 this year. And even Bryce Young, more questions have started to emerge now that he doesn't have quite the same talent around him as normal. And he hasn't really been quite as good this year. I think he and Stroud were still a virtual lock to go 1-2, but the fact that I think when all is said, Will Levis, I just don't see him actually ended up being a top 10 pick. So the fact that there's really only 2 surefire seemingly quarterbacks, I think will help him, but we'll talk about that more as we get closer to it. Matt, let's make some predictions about this game. Like I said, Penn State currently favored by 18.5 points. SP Plus has this as a 41-27 Penn State win. So that's a 23-point difference there for them. I will let you go first.
Of course you will. I don't think this is a big blowout. I think, and with the exception of, I think if Penn State gets up early and can kind of, dictate the nature of the game from the get-go, much like they were able to do against Maryland. I think Michigan State still got talent. They've still got the 2 really good wide receivers. Peyton Thorne isn't whoever it was that Rutgers started a quarterback last week. He's a talented guy.
Or Gavin Wimsatt.
I think this plays out a lot like I mentioned earlier, the 2016 game, where Michigan State hangs around, maybe holds the lead for a period of time. We all get really nervous and everyone's yelling at each other online. And then we look up in the end of the third quarter and it's, 31-10, 28-6, something like that. And I think 18 points feels about right. I was thinking early today something like 31-10, 34-14, something like that. So obviously a slight cover. It's just, I have a really hard time seeing Penn State not ultimately putting this game away and winning pretty comfortably because of what each team's playing for. And I think, like we were just talking about, the matchups, Penn State matches up so well with them, especially Penn State defense versus the Michigan State offense.
Yeah, I actually am leaning more towards a blowout here, actually. I think just the vibes surrounding the Michigan State program right now are just so bad. Obviously those players just got charged. They've been out on suspension. The team has not been playing well, coming off a double overtime loss to what many people think is probably the worst team in the East in Indiana. There's that story that came out today about Mel Tucker getting his $100,000 bonus that is like supposed to be split among the staff that he decided to keep all for himself. Like there's just nothing is going right in East Lansing right now. Like everything is off everywhere you look. And I don't feel like the drive for 6, like obviously it's not where this team was hoping or expecting to be at this point in the year. Like I don't think that's a big motivating factor right now for them. I think this is I think Michigan State's going to turtle over and die in this game. Like I don't think this is a good spot for them.
I'm glad you said that and not me, because you and I both know, and like I mentioned earlier, the green wall is not behind me. We've got the Land Grant Trophy behind me now. That my lovely wife is a Michigan State fan. We have not watched much Michigan State football this year because,
well, they don't really play football. So
as usually happens when Michigan State is struggling, I'm like this with most Penn State and my favorite teams too. When they're struggling, I don't want to watch them. So we have turned off a lot of Michigan State football this year. But if I had said that, and especially if it plays out that way, Matt sleeps on the couch for the week is very much in play.
And the fact that Craig and I discussed this last week, how I was telling about how my wife does not listen to this podcast, so I could say whatever I want. I almost started telling the story of your wife, like you walking into the home and just hearing your voice playing as you walked in, which is fantastic.
Well, and so cat out of the bag. My wife and I are expecting our first child in May, and so I walk into the house last week, and I hear, I think it was my own voice, but it was the podcast that Nick and I did after the Maryland game. And my wife wants the baby to get to know Uncle Nick's voice and Uncle Flip's voice. Dad has not talked to Uncle Bill or Uncle Craig recently, but we'll have to get them on so baby can learn their voices. It was a very out of body experience walking in. First hearing my voice, I turned the corner, and then she's streaming it off of YouTube. There I am. So I am sure sometime in the next 72 hours or so, 48 hours, whatever it is before the game, portions of this will be replayed in my home, and I'm choosing my words very carefully about how I speak about the Spartans.
You can let her know to you can relay any messages she has for me, because yes, I think the Spartans are going to just be left in a tattered carcass on the field in this one. I think Penn State's going to win this something like 48-7. 42. Like I don't think, like I said, I think vibes are horrible around that Spartans program right now. I think Penn State, I think, we talk a lot about how James Franklin understands optics. And I think on the one hand, like I said, Michigan beat Michigan State 29-7. You can bet that James Franklin would like to do better against the Spartans than Jim Harbaugh did. And then also, I'm James Franklin and this program, like they want that New Year's Six bowl bid, and they know that the more they are able to throw the hammer down this weekend, the more their chances will improve at being able to do that. So I think there is, I think they're going to take this game, still pretty seriously. Like there's the more they can score this week, the more they can build their case, because, like we said, just lack of a signature win, just haven't had the opportunities to do that, all that stuff. And of course, the chance to bring home the beautiful, incomparable, difficult to lift Land Grant Trophy, which actually we will talk about the Land Grant Trophy in just a second. First, though, before we get to that, I want to add in the thing I added to our outline here, and that's Sean Clifford. Sean Clifford will be playing his final game in Beaver Stadium on Saturday. Obviously, they'll still have the bowl game coming, so not his final game as a Nittany Lion just yet. But we'll be playing his final game in Beaver Stadium this Saturday against, like we said, surely not a full house, but there'll be some people there going for a 10-win season. It's not nothing. It won't be empty. He has faced a lot of criticism, not only this year, but over the last few years. And, such is always the case with a longtime quarterback for a team, that had two rough years. Especially when you start off with an 11-win season and a near 6 win with the Cotton Bowl, when you don't replicate that in the following years, like there's always going to be calls for your job and whatnot. And, it doesn't help that Will Levis went to Kentucky and has had, reasonable success. I think we've been pretty forthright on, like, I still don't think right now, like, I'm not sure Will Levis would win a competition with Sean Clifford here at Penn State right now. Like, it's up in the air for sure. But, and then this year, obviously, with the arrival of 5-star freshman Drew Aller, backup quarterback is always the most popular position on the team, always the most popular player, especially so when it's the kid that's supposed to, be the savior of your program and be your Trevor Lawrence, to make that Clemson comparison that we've often made. He's dealt with a lot. He's going to end his Penn State career as the record holder for pretty much every quarterback stat you can have for the Nittany Lions. He's very high up on the list of most, if not all, of the Big Ten stats for quarterbacks in general. And while it hasn't always been perfect, I think we're lucky to have had Sean Clifford leading this team for the last 4 years.
Yeah, I think obviously with it being senior week in his last home game, there's been a lot written and discussed about it, and Franklin was asked about it on Tuesday. I think Clifford even met with the media this week. I've always been fascinated, especially these last couple of years, I think, where you see the experience and just the age and maturity of him come through when he talks. I think he's very, and Franklin alluded to this on Tuesday, that he's very self-aware, which I think in this case is a huge positive. I think he's not naive to the complicated relationship that he has, the complicated legacy that he's leaving with the program. But he's if he wins on Saturday, that's 2 10-win seasons as the starting quarterback, 2-2 against Michigan, 3-1 against Michigan State. Some great comebacks, the comeback against Purdue this year, obviously, to start the season. I don't want to say there's more good than bad, because I'm not sure if that's necessarily the case, but there's been a lot of good. I was just telling someone over the weekend, he committed to Penn State before his junior year in high school. So he's a guy that's been around the program for 7 or 8 years now, it feels like. He's obviously been on campus for 6. So it really is kind of a weird conversation to be having, that this is kind of it for him. A guy who, like you said, is going to have his name all over the record books, in part due to a 4-year starting run.
Just the volume, yeah.
But he gets that run because of he's had the 4 years that started because he's been the best option. And we've been through that time and time again. We don't have the conversation, but I think he mentioned this a couple weeks ago. I think it's time for everyone to move on. I'm fascinated to see what he does, whether it's on the field, off the field. Obviously, he has his name, image, and likeness company that he and his brother have started. And teaser, I think Bill's actually going to be speaking with someone connected to the company next week on the podcast. I think he's a guy that's has represented. I think that the best thing you can say about him, he's represented Penn State the way I think we would all hope that Penn State's starting quarterback would represent the program in the university. And that's, I think, one of the biggest compliments you can give anyone in his position, that they've been under the microscope the way he has. Very rarely has he said or done the wrong thing, football performance aside. I think when you look at the way I think a lot of Penn State fans think about the program and being more than just wins and losses, I think he embodies that in a lot of really positive ways.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, like, Penn State fans, I would not say are known for being the most patient bunch. I mean, fans in general, college football fans in general, typically aren't. But when you consider, the fact that probably half of Penn State fans are Philadelphia fans at the same time, it all kind of makes sense. And it would have been very easy for him to not remain as positive and as willing to speak as he has been. Like, he's always been willing to talk to the media. He's always owned up to his faults, his mistakes, and we've seen people in this state like not be able to do that. Like he turned it around really well, but like Alec Boehm, for the Philadelphia Phillies, like had that famous like I effing hate this place like caught on camera. Like it's very easy to cave to what Clifford has had to deal with. And he like I laid out, like he's dealt with more than most college athletes typically have to deal with. Just, due to the fact of how long he's been here and then the circumstances of his backups and all that stuff. So, but like in the end, like is Penn State in position to have a 10-win season right now if Drew Aller was starting week 1? Probably not. Like, do they win that Purdue game? I don't know. Like it's obviously it's impossible to say for sure, but I know Sean Clifford, he's not far from perfect. He certainly has his faults, but he's a college quarterback. Like there, unless you are a truly, truly elite college quarterback, like this is what it looks like. And it's Penn State, I think, has benefited from having him. And I think most importantly, the guys in the room behind him right now, whether it be Aller or Bo Pribula or Christian Veillere, I think they, going forward in their careers, they are going to be better for the fact that they were with Sean Clifford in that room. Because for Clifford's faults, for the things he can't do athletically, or with his arm, like there's no doubting that he is a very smart football player. Like the things he has learned about how to read coverages, how to call audibles, like all that stuff, just how to take control of an offense. Like those are things that you can pass down. You can't pass down arm talent to somebody. You can pass down how to dissect a game and how to lead a team. And those are the qualities that, we expect Drew Aller to be the starting quarterback next year. Those are the things that he is going to impart and has imparted on Aller that are going to make him better and going to make the program better. And then, of course, like you said, all the off-field things. Like he's been a great ambassador for the program. His NIL company is, I'd be really happy for Clifford if he decided to go, try to stick around on an NFL roster on a practice squad or go up to the CFL or XFL or whatever it is he decides to do if he wants to keep playing. But I think he also has shown that he has the chops to be a shrewd businessman in real life away from football, like the rest of us are. So I think he has nothing but the best ahead of him. And I'm grateful for the time that he has spent with us.
Completely agree. And I think just one more thing to add to that is, he was part of the group earlier in the year that is advocating for more of a say for players in matters of college football, whether that's financial or how the game is run and, schedules and playoff, participation and things like that. I think he, like James Franklin said, he has a very keen self-awareness of what he is, I think, both as a player and as a person, and the power that being the starting quarterback at Penn State has to affect change. And I think for the most part, he's used that in a very positive way, and I think he'll continue to do that. I think he's obviously a very bright guy, and like Franklin said on Tuesday, he's taken full advantage of the college football experience and the Penn State experience.
Yeah, definitely. We'll talk more about Clifford, once the season officially comes to a close, as well as the other guys who are playing their final game, final regular season game this week, such as Jair Brown and PJ Mustipher and a whole host of others. Well, we will get to them, but obviously Clifford is probably the preeminent face among that group just for how long he's been here. But Matt, before we get out of here, let's end this on a more fun note. I would like to know what part of the illustrious land grant trophy is your favorite. And it's funny, actually, I saw our friend Matt Brown, formerly of SB Nation, Land Grant Holy Land, now of Extra Points, subscribe to his newsletter if you don't already. But he was positing, he's like, I wonder how difficult it would be to build the land grant trophy. And I wish that our articles were still live, because I was like, listen, man, like we've done this multiple times. Coach has built this out of candy. He's built it out of he's built it for real. He built it out of what, like Legos one year. Like he's done it all. It can be done.
That's one of my great regrets in kind of how the website shut down, was that we didn't have enough foresight to, in some capacity, save some of those articles. I know we tweeted a bunch of them out, but
yeah,
when Jason
maybe
pulled the plug
using
on the
the
server,
Wayback Machine would work. I don't know.
I don't think so. 'Cause, I mean, the server's gone. And I remember asking Jason about this at one point. I think before the season started, because we were trying to find an old article, and it is no longer with us. So maybe Coach saved some of this, or maybe we have some photo documentation. But I had the same thought when I saw Matt's tweet that not only did Coach build it a couple times, but my buddies and I built it a not nearly the lifelike replica that Coach did, but we built it out of an old bathroom vanity. and, was, and this the similarity in appearance that we were able to achieve with just a simple rectangular box, I think is a testament to the forward thinking design that former Michigan State head coach and really Spartan legend George Perlis had when he came up with the idea for the Land Grant Trophy back over 30 years ago now.
It's a work of architectural mastery is how I'll put it. For me, my favorite part of it, and there's a lot to love about it. I love the fact that there are two human-like statues within the same trophy. Like there's the Spartan statue right next to the Nittany Lions statue, but then on top you have literally it's like the statue you get for winning your 8-year-old soccer tournament. Like why in the world was there this thought that there need to be two humanoid structures within the same trophy? It's no notes. It's perfect.
I'm ranking my favorite parts. So I think you touched on one indirectly, but just the random guy on top, just because. Second is it has shelves. This is like the home ec project gone awry, but the shelf that the Spartan statue and the Nittany Lions statue are on, like it just protruding there from the side. Define physics in some way that those things even stay on. I don't even want to know what sort of adhesive they use at this point to keep that on there. But by far, my favorite part is just the sheer size of this thing.
It's so
I was just telling a buddy earlier today, as The Athletic had a great article Audrey Snyder wrote about the origins of the trophy, and they talked to now the daughters of the man who's since passed away. It's a local trophy shop in East Lansing that still does a lot of awards and whatnot for Michigan State, that George Perlis went to. And so they interviewed the gentleman's two daughters, and they were just talking about the sheer size of it. And so it led me to reach out to a friend who's a Michigan State fan, and mention that in my 4 years in the Blue Band, I had the distinct honor of being 6, 10, 20 feet away from this beautiful thing. The sheer size of it, I don't even know if you can really process it until you see it in person. It is enormous. If you are watching on YouTube, you look over my shoulder, and there are two players holding it, and I think they need to. I don't think this is like a one-man job. You've seen a little bit, but it's the guy's like, you have to give it like a bear hug to carry it yourself. Just it's so unique, and the 180 this has done, I think, at least among online Penn State fans and college football Twitter as a whole, from being this ugly thing that no one wants to the beauty in its ugliness, and kind of this renaissance of love for it is really special. Let's be honest.
It's the exact kind of thing that like when Twitter like really started blowing up, essentially, like and this was always kind of like my personal like aesthetic has always been like I love things that are like you should see my closet of the polos I wear to golf. Like I wear the most colorful, like I've got my golf bag is blue with like green flowers all over. I have a bright pink and purple towel. Like I'm all over the place with that aesthetic. So like this is like things that like objectively are ugly, but like that's why they're cool. Like I feel like when Twitter really exploded, like that's the exact shit. Like that's the mindset that everyone like. That's things like the sickos committee. Like things like no. Things aren't like things that are really bad. No, they're actually awesome. And like that's what this is. And
it's so unique, which I think is what you're saying. It's part of Audrey's story in The Athletic. They I can't remember who it was that she quoted, but Penn State and Michigan State personnel went to the Big Ten. I think it was 2009, maybe 2011, something like that, to keep a trophy between Michigan State and Penn State, but to replace our beloved land grant trophy. And the proposal was the Lincoln Trophy. It was going to be like an exaggerated Abraham Lincoln top hat, because obviously he's the one who signed the Land Grant Act in 1860 something. But as luck would have it for us, that several years before, just a couple years before, Northwestern and Illinois had retired their Tomahawk Trophy for obvious reasons, and started playing for the Land of Lincoln Trophy, which of course had Lincoln's hat. So the brainchild quickly died out, and we are left still, 30 years, almost 30 years from Penn State's first year in the Big Ten in 1993, playing for.
And now it's never leaving.
No, and like you said, it's done this. It has had this renaissance of beauty because it is so unique and massive.
Like if it was ever going to be replaced, though, like if it was literally just Lincoln's hat, like a wearable trophy, I'm down with that. Like I'm cool with that. That wouldn't be bad.
Yeah, I can only imagine the post game celebrations.
Yeah, that thing would not survive. Matt, I think it's about time we get out of here. Any final thoughts on this game or anything else?
No, I'm excited. I feel like we're gonna have some chaos this weekend and next weekend with championship week. And I'm not sure if you and I have a chance to talk before championship week next week, but I'm excited. I think this whole season has felt like it's kind of building towards a little bit of fun and, a little bit out of the ordinary for college football. You see it with, some of the teams that are lurking around the top four of the playoff. But I think we're going to get some fun results around the top of the polls and among the top teams in the next couple of weeks that I think are really going to shake things up, that I think, from a Penn State perspective, are probably beneficial as far as getting to a bigger bowl game. So I'm excited to sit back and take a couple of days off, watch a bunch of football, and hopefully get some of that great college football chaos that we love.
Yeah, with the exception of the SEC, a nice chaotic weekend definitely. Next 2 weekends definitely behooves Penn State here for sure. Starting with, let's go Oregon State. Let's start it off strong, Beavers. Let's do it. But yeah, I think that's going to outdo it for today. We will be back next week, of course, to talk about the aftermath of Penn State and Michigan State. As always, if you are not subscribed to the podcast, please make sure you do so on your podcast platform of choice. Also, be sure to check us out on YouTube, where you can see all of the different images in Matt's background. You can see me wear the same outfit 3 podcasts in a row, and you can watch Matt spill in real time. You won't see the spill, but you will see the reaction, and that is almost as good. But that's going to do it for us here today. For myself, Nick Pollock, my co-host, Matt DeBear, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Go State.